It started on an ordinary sidewalk, but what happened next was anything but ordinary. When a pregnant black woman is violently attacked by a cop in broad daylight, the world around her changes in an instant. Celeste Monroe had just left the grocery store, her arms full of bags, a smile on her face. She was pregnant, carrying not just the weight of the groceries, but the excitement of surprising her husband, Gavin, with his favorite dinner. The sun was bright in the clear sky, and as she turned onto the quiet street of 4th and Walnut, everything felt calm. She could already imagine the dinner table at home, the soft hum of music in the background as they spent the evening together, enjoying the food she'd carefully picked out. But as she walked down the sidewalk, her peaceful thoughts were interrupted by the sound of screeching tires. A police cruiser pulled up abruptly, halting right beside her. Celeste didn't have time to process what was happening before the driver's door swung open. Officer Rick Donnelly, a man with a reputation for being harsh and aggressive, stepped out of the car. His eyes locked onto her, and his face twisted with a cold expression. "Hey! What are you doing here?" he shouted, his voice harsh. Celeste froze for a moment, confused. "I'm just walking home, officer. I have groceries," she said, trying to remain calm. But Donnelly wasn't interested in listening. His eyes narrowed and he took a step closer, his presence intimidating. "You're loitering," he snapped. "What are you doing around here?" Celeste's heart began to race. She had lived in this neighborhood for years and had never been confronted like this. She had nothing to hide. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She wasn't loitering. "I'm just heading home, officer," she repeated, trying to defuse the situation. But Donnelly was relentless. His eyes glared down at her, his body language stiff with authority. "Don't talk back to me," he barked. "You don't belong here." Before Celeste could respond, the officer lunged toward her, pushing her back with a forceful shove. The impact caught her off guard and she stumbled, almost losing her balance. She instinctively reached out to steady herself, her grocery bags slipping slightly from her grasp. "Please, officer," she pleaded, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to get home." But instead of stepping back, Donnelly took another step forward. With a cruel look in his eyes, he lifted his foot and kicked her hard in the stomach. Celeste's body crumpled under the force of the kick. Pain shot through her, overwhelming her senses as she crashed to the pavement. The air rushed out of her lungs, and her vision blurred. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach, her heart racing as she gasped for breath. "Is my baby okay?" The world around her seemed to slow. She could hear the distant sound of the city, but everything felt muffled. The pain in her body was unbearable, but the worst was the overwhelming fear for her unborn child. She struggled to sit up, her heart pounding as she clutched her stomach, desperate to make sure her baby was still alive. But it wasn't just the pain that hurt, it was the cruel indifference of the people around her. Bystanders stood nearby, watching, some with their phones out, recording the incident, but no one stepped forward to help. No one called out for the officer to stop. They just watched as Celeste lay there, broken and vulnerable. Tears filled her eyes as she pushed herself up, struggling to her knees. Her hand still rested over her stomach, her thoughts racing. "Please, baby, be okay. Please, please be okay." Officer Donnelly didn't seem to care. He stood over her, his cold gaze unwavering. After a moment, he turned and walked back to his cruiser, slamming the door behind him. Without so much as a second glance, he drove off, leaving Celeste alone on the pavement. The crowd of bystanders began to murmur, but no one moved to help her. Celeste's body shook with pain, but she slowly managed to get to her feet, her knees weak. Her legs felt like jelly, and the weight of the situation was too much to bear. She stumbled to the side of the sidewalk, leaning against the brick wall of a nearby building for support. Was anyone going to help me? She wondered. The answer was clear, no one had. Celeste took a shaky breath and managed to call out to a woman passing by, asking her to call an ambulance. The woman hesitated, but finally she did. As the minutes ticked by, Celeste's mind raced. The pain in her stomach was still sharp, but she couldn't help thinking of her husband, Gavin, and their unborn child. She had to be strong for them. But the fear for her baby lingered. Would her baby be okay after this? Was the kick too much? The uncertainty and the fear of not knowing tore at her. But she had no choice but to hold on, hoping that somehow everything would be all right. As the ambulance arrived, Celeste was helped inside. Her thoughts still clouded with pain and worry. The world outside seemed so distant now. All she wanted was to get home, to be with Gavin and the life they had built together. But for now, all she could do was wait for answers and hope that her baby was safe. Gavin Monroe had just finished a long day at his counseling center, a place where he helped fellow veterans adjust to civilian life. It had been a routine day, nothing out of the ordinary. But everything changed when the phone rang. His heart dropped as soon as he heard the voice on the other end. "Mr. Monroe, this is the hospital. Your wife, Celeste, she's been attacked. You need to come immediately." The words felt like a punch to his stomach. He barely registered the rest of the conversation as his mind went blank. He couldn't comprehend the details. His wife, pregnant with their child, attacked. He felt the blood drain from his face, the weight of fear crashing down on him. His knees buckled slightly, and he had to steady himself against his desk. "Where is she?" Gavin forced himself to ask, his voice barely audible. "The hospital on 5th Street, the voice on the other end responded, before the line went silent. Without another word, Gavin rushed out of the building, his mind spinning with terrifying thoughts. He drove as fast as he could, barely noticing the traffic or the red lights. All he could think about was Celeste. Was she okay? Was their baby okay? When he arrived at the hospital, panic surged through him. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit him immediately as he rushed through the doors, only stopping long enough to ask a nurse where he could find Celeste. His heart pounded in his chest as she guided him down the hall to the emergency room. There he found Celeste, sitting up in a hospital bed, her face pale, bruises darkening her skin. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of relief. She was alive. But the sight of her, so vulnerable, her body battered, shook him to his core. "Celeste!" Gavin's voice cracked as he stepped closer to her, taking her hand gently in his. "I'm okay," Celeste whispered, her voice weak but reassuring. "The baby is okay too." Gavin swallowed hard, his chest tightening. Tears stung his eyes, but he forced them back. "Who did this to you? What happened?" Celeste's eyes clouded with pain as she spoke, her voice trembling. "It was a cop, Officer Rick Donnelly. He just attacked me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was walking home. And then he pushed me, kicked me." Her hand instinctively went to her stomach again, and Gavin followed the motion, his heart racing. "I'm so sorry, Celeste. I should have been there with you. I should have." Gavin's voice broke, the guilt overwhelming him. He wasn't there when she needed him the most. Celeste squeezed his hand. "It's not your fault. He was the one who did this." Gavin held her hand tighter, trying to push away the anger and helplessness that threatened to consume him. He had always protected her, always promised to keep her safe. How could something like this happen to her, to their baby? Before Gavin could say anything more, a nurse entered the room, her expression somber. She gently told them that Celeste would need to stay for observation, and that they'd run more tests to ensure that the baby was unharmed. The words barely registered in Gavin's mind. He nodded absently, still trying to process the horror of what had happened. Once the nurse left, Gavin pulled out his phone, determined to find out more. He had a feeling, an awful, sinking feeling, that this was just the beginning. As he scrolled through the news, his stomach turned. There was a video of the attack. The footage, shot by a bystander, showed Celeste standing on the sidewalk, groceries in hand, as Officer Donnelly confronted her. Gavin's breath caught as he watched the officer push Celeste, her body jerking backward, before Donnelly's boot connected with her stomach. The video, though shaky, clearly showed the officer's brutality. And worse, the bystanders in the background did nothing, just watched as Celeste fell to the ground. Gavin's blood boiled. He could feel his anger rising as he watched the video over and over again. How could this happen? How could someone, especially someone sworn to protect, do this to his wife? But then something changed. The video spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, and within hours, social media exploded with outrage. People shared the video, commenting with hashtags demanding justice for Celeste. The hashtag Justice for Celeste went viral, gaining momentum from people all over the city and even beyond. It wasn't just Black communities speaking out. People from all walks of life were outraged by the attack. The video had sparked something deeper within the city, a collective outrage that couldn't be ignored. Gavin stood in silence as the messages flooded in. Support from friends, from strangers, from allies. But in the midst of it all, he felt only one thing: determination. He had to make sure that Officer Donnelly paid for what he had done. Not just for Celeste, but for every person who had been mistreated by the system. The video had sparked a fire, and Gavin was ready to fight. The next day, Gavin called his old army buddy, Marcus Price, a criminal defense attorney. Together they had fought battles in the past, but this was different. This was personal. Marcus answered quickly. "Gavin, what's going on?" Gavin didn't waste time with pleasantries. "A cop attacked Celeste. I need your help. We're going after him." Marcus's voice grew serious. "I'm on it. I'll start pulling together the legal team." But Gavin didn't stop there. He knew they needed more. He called Rosa Fields, a civil rights attorney who had fought tirelessly for justice in the community. She had always been passionate about standing up to corruption, and he needed her expertise. Together, the three of them formed a legal team dedicated to seeking justice for Celeste and holding Officer Donnelly accountable. The fight had only just begun, but Gavin was ready. He wasn't going to let this moment pass. As the support for their cause grew, the pressure mounted. The city's leadership had no choice but to respond. Officer Donnelly's actions had sparked outrage not just in the Black community but across all divides. It was clear, justice had to be served. As the days passed, Gavin's anger never subsided. The video of Officer Donnelly's brutal attack on Celeste continued to make waves, spreading across social media and news outlets. It wasn't just the shocking violence that enraged people. It was the way Celeste had been treated like her life didn't matter. The officer had kicked a pregnant woman, and the city had done nothing about it. But now things were changing. Gavin, fueled by the support of his community, was determined to hold the system accountable. He couldn't let Celeste's pain be in vain. He couldn't let this injustice go unnoticed. With a legal team in place, Marcus, the sharp and determined attorney who had fought in the trenches with him during their time in the army, and Rosa Fields, the passionate civil rights lawyer who had helped countless others, it was time to take action. The first step was filing the formal complaint against Officer Donnelly and the city. But Gavin knew that this battle was going to be more than just a legal fight. It was going to be a fight for justice on every level. The video of the attack had already ignited protests across the city. People were angry. People were upset. But most of all, people were ready for change. Signs demanding justice for Celeste were everywhere, in storefront windows, in people's yards, and on social media profiles. A movement was born, and Gavin was at the heart of it. "Celeste, I'll make sure he pays for what he did to you. I'll make sure they all know this wasn't just some accident. This is part of a system that's been broken for too long," Gavin told his wife, his voice heavy with determination. Celeste, despite her injuries, refused to stay silent. Her voice became a symbol of strength and resistance, echoing through the streets as she spoke out at rallies, on social media, and in interviews. The pain from her attack was still fresh, but she was unwavering in her resolve. She knew that her fight wasn't just about her. It was about the countless others who had suffered at the hands of the system. "I'm doing this for all of us," she would say in her speeches. "This isn't just my fight. This is for every person who has been mistreated by a system that is supposed to protect us." Her words resonated with so many, and the support continued to grow. More people joined the protests, marching down the streets with signs and chants, demanding justice. The people wanted accountability. They wanted Officer Donnelly off the streets. As the case moved forward, Gavin, Marcus, and Rosa knew that they were up against more than just a rogue cop. The entire police department had ignored Officer Donnelly's past actions. His history of misconduct, his aggressive behavior, and his complete disregard for the rights of those he was supposed to protect. But the fight wasn't just in the streets, it was in the courtroom. And it was there that the real battle would begin. In preparation for the trial, Rosa and Marcus began gathering evidence. They interviewed witnesses, spoke with experts on police misconduct, and dug into Officer Donnelly's past. What they found was damning. Donnelly had a history of complaints against him. Complaints that had been ignored or brushed aside by the department. He had repeatedly used excessive force against civilians, particularly black individuals, and the department had failed to hold him accountable. The pressure on the city was mounting. Gavin was no longer just fighting for his wife. He was fighting for a future where justice wasn't just a word. He was fighting for the people who had been failed by the system time and time again. On the day of the trial, Celeste was determined to testify. She had been through so much, but she knew that her voice could make a difference. She had to speak up for herself, for their baby, and for everyone who had been silenced by fear. Gavin stood beside her in the courtroom, his hand gently resting on her back. As Celeste took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice was steady, but the pain in her eyes was evident. "I was just walking home," she began, her voice clear, though it trembled with the weight of what had happened. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't deserve what happened to me. But Officer Donnelly decided that my life didn't matter. And now I'm here to tell you that my life does matter. My baby's life matters." Tears filled Gavin's eyes as he listened to Celeste's words. The strength it took for her to speak, to relive the trauma, was immense. But she was doing it. She was fighting not just for her own justice but for everyone who had been hurt by a broken system. The prosecution presented their evidence, including the viral video, witness testimonies, and expert opinions on Celeste's injuries. The video played again, the footage showing Celeste, pregnant and defenseless, being violently kicked by Officer Donnelly. The room was heavy with emotion as people watched the attack unfold again. After days of testimony and deliberation, the jury finally reached their verdict. Officer Donnelly was found guilty on all counts: assault, battery, and misconduct. The room erupted in a mix of relief and anger, as people realized that this was just one small victory in the much larger fight for justice. Gavin felt the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about this case. It was about everything that had led up to it. It was about the community coming together, demanding change. It was about the courage of Celeste, who had turned her pain into power. And it was about the undeniable truth that no one, no matter their badge or title, was above the law. But the battle wasn't over. Gavin and Celeste knew that this was only the beginning. Their victory in the courtroom was important, but it was just one step in a much larger movement. They had to keep pushing for police reform, for changes in the system that had allowed Officer Donnelly's actions to go unchecked for so long. The Monroes were not just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for every person who had been silenced, oppressed, and mistreated. Their fight would continue, and they knew they were not alone. The movement they had started, the voices they had raised, had become a force that would change their city, and perhaps the world, forever. The days following Officer Donnelly's conviction were filled with mixed emotions. On one hand, there was a deep sense of relief, a belief that justice had been served. On the other hand, the Monroes knew that their fight wasn't over. They had won this battle, but the war against systemic injustice was far from finished. Gavin stood at the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd gathered in front of the courthouse. The air was crisp, and the city seemed to hold its breath as the Monroes' victory rippled through the streets. "This isn't just a win for Celeste and me," Gavin said, his voice rising with passion. "This is a win for every person who has been overlooked, silenced, and treated as if their life doesn't matter. This is just the beginning. We will not stop here." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the streets. People had come from all over to stand in solidarity with the Monroes, to celebrate not just the conviction of one police officer, but the movement that had begun. It was a victory for the people, a collective moment of empowerment. But for Gavin and Celeste, the real work was just beginning. The city, shaken by the events that had unfolded, had no choice but to respond. Conversations about police reform gained momentum, and the Monroes were right there at the forefront, pushing for change. As the months went by, Gavin and Celeste worked tirelessly to turn their pain into something productive, something that could bring lasting change. They founded the Monroe Initiative, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing legal support to victims of police violence, offering resources for survivors, and advocating for policy changes that would ensure accountability in law enforcement. "We can't just wait for the next person to be hurt. We need to act now," Celeste said in an interview. "It's time for us to stand up and demand that our voices be heard, that our lives are valued." Their nonprofit quickly gained traction. Lawyers, activists, and community leaders rallied around the initiative, eager to help in any way they could. The Monroes used their platform to provide resources and assistance for families who had suffered similar injustices, giving them the legal tools and emotional support they needed to fight back. As they traveled the country to speak at rallies, meetings, and community events, Celeste also focused on advocating for maternal health, particularly the risks that Black women face during pregnancy. Celeste's own experience, needing constant reassurance about her baby's health after the attack, had brought the issue to light. Too often, Black women in the United States faced higher rates of maternal mortality and lacked access to quality care. "Black women deserve to have the same kind of care and attention as anyone else," Celeste stated passionately at a health summit. "Our lives are just as valuable, and our children's lives matter just as much. We cannot continue to ignore the disparities in our healthcare system." Her words struck a chord with many, and soon advocacy for maternal health became a significant part of the Monroes' broader mission for justice. The organization partnered with hospitals, health organizations, and community leaders to push for changes in healthcare policies, especially for marginalized communities. But it wasn't just about policy reform or public speeches. It was about their own family. In the quiet moments when they were alone together, Celeste and Gavin focused on what mattered most: their son, Justice. A year after the attack, the Monroes celebrated their son's first birthday with a block party that brought together their community, friends, and supporters. The event was filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of people who had been touched by their story. Gavin stood with Celeste, watching their son toddle around, his small hands reaching for the balloons. Celeste smiled, her heart swelling with pride. It was a moment of peace, a moment where they could just be a family, free from the pressures of the fight. At the birthday party, Gavin took the microphone and addressed the crowd once again. His voice was steady, but there was a sense of calm in his words. "This day is not just about celebrating our son, Justice. It's about celebrating the strength of this community. It's about celebrating the progress we've made, and the work we still have to do." The crowd cheered, but there was a sense of quiet resolve among them. They had come so far, but there was still more to be done. The movement wasn't over. The fight for justice, for police reform, for equality, and for a better future for their children continued. As the sun set on that beautiful day, Gavin and Celeste watched their son take his first steps. It was a powerful symbol of how far they had come, how much they had achieved, and the future they were building. A future where every child, no matter their race, no matter their background, could walk with their heads held high, free from fear. Their journey, from that fateful afternoon on the sidewalk to this moment of joy, had been filled with heartache, struggle, and sacrifice. But in the end, it was a journey that had changed them and changed the world around them. The Monroes' fight for justice wasn't just about winning a case. It was about creating a movement that would outlast their own pain. It was about ensuring that the world would be a better place for their son, for every child, and for every person who had been hurt by a system that had failed them. And as they watched their son take his first steps, Gavin and Celeste knew that they had done more than just fight for justice. They had created a legacy of change, of hope, and of the unwavering belief that justice, though hard-fought, was worth every step.